Thank you. Good morning. I'm Wlissa Richards, Chairperson of the Utah Geological Survey Board, and I'd like to call this meeting of the Utah Geological Survey Board to order. It is now 8:31 a.m. on January 20th, 2021. This meeting is being held virtually with Google Meet due to the COVID-19 stay home, stay safe order. In compliance with the Utah's open meeting laws, this meeting is being recorded in its entirety. This recording is classified as a public record, and the following board members are in attendance: Wlissa Richards, Dave Garbrecht, Rick Chestnut, Ken Fleck, Mark Eccles, Pete Kilborn, Tom Faddis, and I didn't see if is Dave on?
I don't see him on the list.
Okay, so I'll take Dave off. Wasn't sure. All right. So the following board members are absent: Sam Quigley and Dave Garbrecht. The following individuals representing the Utah Geological Survey and the Department of Natural Resources are in attendance: Director Bill Keach, Mike Hilland. Is Jodi on?
No.
Okay. Cheryl Guston, Jay Hill, Steve Bowman, Paul Gedge, Chris Arner, Eugene Szymanski, and Mike Vandenberg. Did I get everybody, Director Keach?
Let me check. Yes.
Okay. If present, we welcome all visitors and interested persons at this time. And as a courtesy to everyone participating in this meeting, at this time, we ask for all cell phones, pagers, and other electronic devices to be turned off or changed to silent mode. Board motions and votes will be reflected in the minutes and recorded by in the individual board member. Let us now proceed with the agenda. Director Keach.
Okay. I think you need your next step. Hang on a moment. See if I can see my. Can you see my slides?
Yep. Should we approve the board minutes first before we dive in?
You bet. Yes.
Okay. I would like to propose that the approval of the minutes, or that the minutes be approved. Do I have anybody who can second second that?
I'll second it.
Okay. The approval of minutes from the previous board meeting, and what date was that? Was it
October
14th? October 14th are approved. And I think beyond that, do you want me to do the formal approval of the project proposals, Bill?
Yes.
Well, okay. And we also want to formally approve all of the project proposals that we saw via email. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we'll do Ken and Mark. And
Aye for me too.
okay.
Took me a while to find the button.
Thanks, Pete. All right. Was there anything else beyond that, Director Keith, you need me to do before we proceed with the director's report?
No, I think that's it.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. I'll try and keep this going here. Good morning, everyone. Glad that you're here to join us today. I've turned my camera off in part just to save my bandwidth. Like I was telling Ken earlier, I'm on internet via microwave dish on my roof in central Utah. So my bandwidth may be a little bit. So let's see, let's go down. So this slide hasn't changed much. You'll see a question mark on here. We're giving COVID updates. We do this every week in our executive leadership meeting with all of DNR. It continues to impact what we do and how we do it. We have not made a rush to bring people back into the office yet. The only people that are working in the office are those that have chosen to do so. They prefer to be there. We do try to have at least one program manager in the office each day. so that if there's something needs to be signed off. Last time I said offices are sanitized daily. I've heard some reports the last couple of days that some of our folks aren't seeing that. So that's I've got to do some follow up on that. We've been told they are. Maybe there's coming in at a different time of day. But we do continue to follow all of our state and local guidelines. Again, this is probably summer before we try to get some sense of normalcy out of this. Field work, carried on. It got a little delayed. But boy, we have been writing grants and getting grants. And in one case, we'll hear from the groundwater folks a little later from Hugh, Hurlow, and Diane. Diane runs our Wetlands program. And she applied for 3 EPA grants and got all 3 of them. And the division of the Environmental Quality's Water Quality Division is talking to us about giving us theirs because they don't have the bandwidth to do it. But our wetlands folks are very prolific and are doing well. Our bookstore is still on modified hours, 10 to 5. So in the middle of the pandemic, one thing I wanted to do is just ask, how's this work from home, how's it affected our productivity? And a lot of people, I'm not the only one that's asked that question. But one thing we did, maybe it's a bit of a background. We first built our building block back in the summer of 2019, which was my first foray into deciding how much money I wanted to ask the legislature for. The then director of the Governor's Office of Management and Budget, affectionately known as GOMBI, she had an equation that she asked everybody that asked for state money to complete. And it was called QT over OE, which meant quality times throughput divided by your operating expense. And as knowledge workers, we struggled a little bit. I probably explained this to you before, so this is just a quick summary. But we tried to define a bunch of the products, knowledge products that we deliver to the public. And this was a list. It's not comprehensive, but it's a list. And we attempted to assign a relative score. Hugh Hurlow led our effort on this, but all program managers were involved in this. And so we eventually adopted this number of products and a scoring mechanism. And so what I asked the program manager to do over the last week was to go through this. I'm not going to worry about the operating expense side, but just to identify how many products we've delivered in fiscal year 20, which would have been through June 30th of last year, and in calendar year. I wanted to get a sense of how productive we've been. So here's a chart that I made, and let me hopefully explain this a little bit, but this is for each program. So up here, you'll see mapping. I don't know if you can read the font. There's the top one. And this green line was a baseline that we did back in 2019. This blue line is what we did in fiscal year 20 in mapping. So that's all of their maps. And I can show you the details if you want. Ask me and I can pull it up. But it includes all of their maps, the reports, the public presentations, anything that was on this list. And then I compared that with fiscal year 20. So it had an overlap with the fiscal year. It's off a little bit, but that's probably more timing of USGS deliverables on some of the maps. The next line down was energy and minerals. And their calendar year was more productive than the fiscal year. So they're still doing pretty good. They're writing grants and delivering reports and doing a lot of online presentations. The next one down here is a GIO, which is Mark Milligan's group. So fiscal year 20 and calendar year 20, about the same. Groundwater, again, this is kind of nuances of deliverables. But again, calendar year is as productive as the fiscal year. And almost the same down here at the bottom one, which is hazards. So for me, this is one measure that says we're still doing a pretty good job. If you add these numbers, the numbers were calculated by just taking, they made 10 maps, scored each one times 100 points. And again, that's the scoring mechanism. But if you add all the points of calendar year 20 versus fiscal year 20, we're pretty dang much the same. We're really close. And that was heartening for me. My sense was that we were doing pretty good. You know, we have individuals, of course, that are probably struggling. But as a program, as programs and as a vision, I think we're doing pretty good. They've coped with COVID, and I think in a very positive way. Any questions? Okay, thanks. By the way, I don't know if you can you guys, I don't know if you can see this class. Did you guys receive these yet? No, okay. So, you know, some years you've been able to get a shirt or a jacket. This year for employees, you got one of these double steel wall glasses from Hardy that has engraved on it, Utah DNR Geological Survey. So we ordered one for each of the board members, and I think Cheryl or Star actually.
I've got them ready. I just need to get two people. I'm waiting on two addresses. Everybody's confirmed theirs, but two people, and I can't remember. I think Ken. I don't think I got a response from you as far as your address. But everything else, they're almost ready to go out. So as soon as I get the other two responses for the addresses, then you guys should have them probably within like a week and a half.
Okay, I'll get right on it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Appreciate that. So personnel changes. Couple of things here. I think I asked some program managers to kind of handle their own introductions. So Steve Bowman, do you want to introduce Chris Arner?
Sure, that's Steve Bowman. We've got a new volunteer that's helping us out on a variety of projects. Chris Arner, he's a student up at Weber State, and he's on the call right now. So if you want to say anything about your background, Chris, go ahead.
So hello guys, my name is Chris Arner. Yep, as you said, I'm a student at Weber State University, majoring in geology and environmental science. And so, yeah, let's see. Yeah, let's see. Besides that, yeah, there's that's probably the best about me right there. So, yeah, I really like this kind of stuff. So,
Thank you, Chris, and you're welcome to join us for the whole board meeting. We'll just be what we do is we review what each of the programs is doing, and we talk about that. You saw some motions that go on. But anyway, thanks for joining us today, Chris.
nope, thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
You're welcome. And our energy and minerals, I've asked Mike Manenberg has offered to introduce Eugene Szymanski. Mike?
Yeah, good morning. So as everybody knows, Tom Chizzy retired the end of September. We put out the job announcement, got quite a few applications, 135 applications. So it took a couple months to go through the applications, do the interview process, and we are very excited to introduce to the board Eugene Szymanski. He officially started January 4 or 5, a couple weeks ago. He's currently still down in Houston, but will of course be moving up to Salt Lake at some point in the next few months. And we are excited to have him on board. So Eugene is online here, and he's going to give you a little talk about his background.
Hey, good morning, everybody. This is Eugene. I'm very happy everybody's gotten the last name pretty close already, Szymanski. It's easier to say than to spell. So, Bill, I have a slide to show. Is that possible, or should I just talk?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So
I will stop sharing.
all right.
And if you can get in, if you need permissions, let me know.
Okay. I will present a window, and I will do this one.
First thing,
Bill,
Eugene, did I spell your name right?
maybe, I don't know. Where is it spelled?
Oh, never mind.
Oh, on the slide. Yeah. Can you see the slide I'm about to show?
Yes, I can see it. Go ahead.
Great. So there I am, Eugene Szymanski. There's where I was educated prior to work. I started with a bachelor's degree at a small state school in Pennsylvania called Bloomsburg University, then went to Boston College and then University of Kansas, kind of rounded out geophysics and then structure and tectonics education. So my research specialties are really around geothermal and using that for energy and mineral resource assessment. Do a lot of chronostratigraphy. In my previous job, I've done a lot of source to sink analysis of modern and ancient depositional systems, basin time temperature histories, things like that. Like Mike said, I just started as a senior geologist with the Energy and Mineral Division. Prior to that, I was with Chevron for about 11 years, the last 6 of which were as a senior technical geologist in what's called our Chevron Technology Center. Before that, I was doing deep water exploration for the company. I've got other affiliations too, adjunct at University of Arkansas and University of Kansas, where I get to oversee some graduate students and teach those courses for those schools. I take a lot of pride in professional service too, so I serve on 2 GSA committees right now. As an industry rep for the Membership and Fellowship Committee and as a member at large for the Bascom Mapping Award Committee. I've spent a lot of the last 6 years looking at basins all over the world. So my exploration mapping and sort of source to sink analysis covers pretty much everywhere between the poles, mostly focused in a lot of the Cretaceous in the Atlantic, also some stuff in the Middle East and other clastic systems. I've done a lot of work in the Gulf of Mexico, all around the Gulf of Mexico, from Jurassic up through Pleistocene. And I tend to take a lot of pride in my field research and mapping skill set. So I'm excited to get maybe back into the field again. The 2 sort of longer field excursions I've had have been in Saudi Arabia and the Republic of Georgia in support of both of my graduate degrees. So that's a little bit about me, and I look forward to interacting with the board from here on out. Please write me an email or get in touch if you have any questions or you want to collaborate on anything. Thank you.
Thank you, Eugene. Glad to have you aboard. Bring up my presentation again. Okay, there we go. So this is my question. I think I spelled your name right. On our very first meeting, an employee all hands me, I misspelled Eugene's last name. So
you got it, Bill. Thank you.
Hey, it's nothing like making a mistake once. Getting it corrected, to help you learn it right. So appreciate that. I know we have Catherine online. Her first day was yesterday. My understanding is that Hugh wanted to introduce her during his presentation a little later. Catherine, is that okay with you, or did you want me to do it now?
Oh, that's all right. I can wait until Hugh's presentation. Yeah. Okay.
Thanks, Catherine. Yeah, Catherine joined yesterday, so she's the newest employee of the UGS. Glad to have her on board. And Rebecca Lee has also been an intern but got promoted. We'll hear about those 2 a little later. I haven't had anybody come and say they're retiring this year yet. It's always possible that we'll have some more. We had 2 last year. Well, end of 2019 was Doug Sprinkles, and we had Tom Schutze. I certainly suspect as people start to wind down their career, we do have one individual who was planning to retire, but wanted to move out of state if he could continue to work from home and come back to Utah for field work. He's a field mapper. And I think I'd say Bob Beek. He had parents that were getting, that he wanted to go back home and start helping take care of. So they're in the process. He'll be living out of state, but working still in state for us. This COVID has introduced a new era of how people work. We're not going to make it a rule that I'm not going to say that option is going to be available for everybody, but somebody like Bob has certainly proved his worth and what he can do. We're going to treat it on a case by case. What was interesting is I went to the state HR folks and I said, Okay, I've had my first request to move to work from out of state. I'm sure you guys have been inundated. They said, no, nobody's asked yet. And I was surprised because I was expecting this to come. I just said no. But there are no rules that prohibit it. So we'll treat it on a case by case. And as we get back to more normal, but for someone like Bob, it was either he was going to move and resign or retire, or he can move and live out of state and we could keep leveraging his field mapping skills. I chose the latter because I think Bob.
You chose well, Bill.
Okay.
Letting Bob get away would not be a good idea if we can prevent it.
No, we need Bob. Bob's great. So I see it as an option for us, again, on a case-by-case basis. We were, with the retirements, and we got some, in the last budget cycle, let me back up a little bit. When we were preparing our budget, like I said, we went through that QTO re-exercise for Gombe, and it really drove home the point that we needed additional funds, to meet what we were doing and to keep some of our employees happy. And last year, for fiscal year 20, we're in 21, right? Yeah. So for fiscal year 21, we'd asked for $850,000 of money. We'd asked for $650,000 of ongoing funds and $200 to catch up on old maintenance. In the end, the legislature gave us $400,000 of ongoing and $400,000 of one-time. I'll talk about some of that one-time money a little bit later. But as part of between the retirements and some new ongoing money, we were able to make some really needed and long lost, or not lost, the wrong word, but just hadn't been done for a long time promotions, which was really good. And they were well received. So a couple of senior scientists, Janae Wallace, Jim Kirkland, and Don Clark. That's kind of the equivalent of our program managers. Chitsy, I believe, was a senior scientist. I think Mike Hilland is a senior scientist, kind of gives you a sense. But people that have been, really doing the job for a long time and doing it well. And you'll see the rest down that list there. So there's quite a few people that got promoted this last go around. We had the support of DNR leadership because they knew that we'd had a lot of people's careers had stagnated just because of our budget funding problems. And so we were excited to make these. We were also able to give some ASI raises as well. One of the greatest things I got to do, and I actually drove up from Southern Utah so I could do this in person, was our Employee of the Year. Process in the UGS is we take nominations from employees. And then as a director, I form a committee, but I don't vote on the committee. But I get to pull it together and pull the nominations in. So we had a record 11 different people nominated. Star was the winner. She was nominated by 6 different people. 5 or 6, I can't remember. But anyway, she had way more nominations than anybody. And when the committee met, she was a unanimous selection. And you can read the verb. I put all the verbiage. This is a compilation of the different nominations, but Star has chosen to be at the office just about every day during COVID. And she's been the person that, if we need something at the office, she'll go get it. And in many ways, she's been the face of the UGS in the office and has been a resource for everybody that needs something. So anyway, we're excited to have Star. We were able to get her family to join us. We did it via our online meeting, and we were able to sneak in some of her family members, and she didn't know they were there. So it was fun to recognize Star. Anyway, she does a great job. So next time you see her, tell her congratulations for a job well done. The Hinsey Award, last board meeting was like a week before the announcement, but a committee of university department chairs and UGA, leadership and myself took a number of nominations and they selected it down. And the recipient this year of the Hensey Award was David Simon. Some of you may know him, but here's kind of the criteria. Dave, I didn't know Dave personally, but Dave has done a lot for Utah geology over the years and been a big contributor. So if you hadn't heard it, I just wanted you to be aware. I've been showing this slide for the last couple of board meetings. I changed some of the verbiage. I didn't put question mark. I'm hoping that I took the question mark off. I'm hoping we can do this in the fall. That we can. I'm being optimistic here. Okay, that we'll be able to pull this off. Yeah, there's my fingers crossed. So let's shift into our programs, some summaries. And as I go through them, if the program managers are on and they feel I've left something out, or I encourage them to chime in here. But I ask each of the program managers for a synopsis. I always ask for 2 or 3 sentences that summarize what's going on in their program, and I always get way more than 2 or 3 sentences. Their folks are doing a lot of good stuff, and they want to make sure you guys know about it. But we have started work in Steptoe Valley, which is actually in Nevada, on a big regional geothermal project, working with Sandia. I believe this is under the direction of Nevada's, or the University of Nevada. The DOE Cane Creek Project, you've heard a little bit about this. Last time, we were, in the last few weeks, we were actually able to successfully drill and recover about 110 feet of core. Mike Vandenberg will share with you some pictures, and he'll have a little presentation about, and you can quiz him on that project. Critical minerals continues to be in the spotlight often. Mapping out at Gold Hill, we're working on vanadium exploration, and we're continuing to put out reports on critical minerals in Utah. I think we're still getting core donations. You'll hear me talk a little bit later. We asked for some money to put up shelves, but we have so much core coming in that we're looking for places to put it. And right now it's just scattered around the core center. The Mirabolite mounds, which were all the rage last February, have come back. This year, Mike Vandenberg and his group were prepared. They got time-lapse cameras out there and set them up prior to the formation. They got temperature data, conductivity, got some great photos. And we didn't tell anybody until we kind of collected all the data we needed. And that, you may have seen it in the news recently. And I think the state park out there is actually doing some tours of the Mirabolite mounds. But this year we got a good science background for it, and will lead to preparation of 1 or more papers. Hazards. This was a big deal, getting out an updated edition of Geologic Hazards Investigations Guidelines. It's a big update, but if you're a geologist in Utah or a geotechnical engineer and you want to know how to investigate a site, this is the go-to book. This is specific to Utah, and Steve has shared this around. I think other states have looked at this and have used some of the stuff we put together here for that. Hazards also continues to work on trace mapping of surface faults in what we're calling special study areas. But these are ongoing in Cache Valley, Bear Lake area, Twilla, and Rush Valley. We've pretty much finished most of the Wasatch Front and have that data out. Groundwater wetlands. I mentioned earlier that they got 3 EPA wetland grants, which is huge. Total grant, meaning the size of the project, is almost $1 million. In the outside funding, because they get almost 75% funding for their projects as opposed to typical DOE grants, which are 50% match, meaning we got to kick in 50% of whatever the total project is. But they got outside funding of $722,000. That's a big deal for the next 3 years. It'll fund most of their work for the next 2 or 3 years. A big project that we got pulled into is something called ground-based measurement of evapotranspiration. Now, I was asked, why is evapotranspiration in bold? I said, I did not know what evapotranspiration is. I confess, okay? You asked me what ground roll is on a seismic, I can tell you that. But evapotranspiration is an attempt to measure all the water that is consumed, like if you're in fields and agriculture, what evaporates, what is consumed, all that kind of stuff. This is a big project to understand that will help us better understand the roles of water in agriculture and things like that. Our groundwater group does such a great job that, Brian Steed, our executive director, continues to emphasize to other divisions around the state that if they want an idea or if they want help, they should come to our groundwater folks because they're doing such a good job. They continue to put out good work. The water budget studies that we've done in Ogden Valley and Cedar Valley, down in the Cedar City area, continue to be topics of public presentations. I don't know how many of you are aware, but down in Cedar Valley, they're consuming way more water, pumping out way more water than they're putting in. So the data that we generated down in Cedar Valley has led to water rights issuing a 30-year plan to roll back the amount of water rights that are down there. Because they're pumping 27,000 acre feet. They're only recharging 21,000, and people own 40,000, the rights to 40,000 acre feet. And so these guys are doing the work that lays the science for understanding where we are, that helps other divisions lay out the guidelines and the rules. So good work. Mapping, it's been a big year for mapping. Excuse me. They completed, their state map deal was for fiscal year 20, which under the federals is not due until September. And so those are being done, and they're now trying to get those maps out into the open file. What really drove this was that we had a lot of additional funding this past year for fiscal year 21 from state map, more than triple the previous year. At the federal level, there's been a huge increase of funding for mapping in the states. The UGS was awarded $458,000. I'm rounding the numbers there. And then we got some 100% money, $92,000, which is a big deal. But a total workload, because on that 458, we've got to match it with our own staff salaries. That's about $1 million worth of work, and that's huge. And so, we're struggling in there to get this down and get it out. But Grant's working hard. He's had to reach across other programs. He's pulling in people, from energy and metals and from groundwater and GIO to make this happen. This problem, which we think it's a good problem because it brings money in. The hard problem is, how do we find the match? So it also adds another layer into this new funding that by enticing us with more money, they put in requirement that we change the schema that we use to make our maps in. The USGS has developed something they call GEMS, which is different than what we've done. And so when Doug Sprinkle retired, we actually hired a senior GIS analyst, Rosemary Faslin, to come in and to learn and then become our GEMS specialist. And so she's got a whole program laid out now to teach people in UGS how to use the new format, how to convert many of our old maps. And she's now put out a schedule to start training people so that we can meet this new requirement. So here comes the kick. There's even more money available for next fiscal year. So remember, we did $1 million project fiscal year 21. For fiscal year 22, the additional funding allowed us to propose up to $1.5 million in projects. Again, a huge stress for the UGS, and we really debated long and hard how much to go for. But historically, we've only gotten about 60 to 70% of what we propose. That's pretty normal. So we went ahead and asked for close to the max. The max is you could have asked for $800,000. We'll see how much we get, and we'll start to rewrite and get that stuff done in March, but we don't know yet. But a lot of effort.
Bill,
Sir.
So in the effort with the legislature coming up right now, will you be explaining to them that we've been so successful in getting grant money that we need additional staff to be able to take advantage of all this money? And for state map, it's core geological data that the state needs, and what they're getting is a 50% deal on it, basically. I mean, it could be described that way, or at least I would describe it that way. So is that part of your pitch to the legislature this year or not?
No, it will be, yes.
Good.
And we're slated to be in front of the legislature February 2nd, for those that want to watch. That's on February 2nd at 8 in the morning. The Appropriations Subcommittee for DEQ, DNR, and Ag meet. They meet in like every other day, so we're in like their 5th session. It's February 2nd. We're at the end of the morning, so somewhere between probably close to 9:30, 10 o'clock that day we'll be on. Those are all public. But yes, we will incorporate that in, that we can get a 2-for-1 here. Or if you want to say another way, we get a 50% discount to get this work done. So it's a good investment for the state. Good point. So anyway, lots of big money coming, if we can get it. Again, it just requires us to pull this off to reach across different divisions. It'll be how do I want to say this? It puts stress on the other programs because they're sharing some of their staff as well. So it may cut into what they want to do, or if we can get some more staff in to pull it off, that's the real request, and we can make that ask. So anyway, we're just trying to get people lined up to make sure this comes off.
If you don't have staff to do that work, can you hire a contractor?
We can, and we've got that built into the proposal. And some of those contractors, you know, when Doug Sprinkle left, he wanted to keep doing work. And so he's on the current project for fiscal year 21, at least starting in January. And a number of other UGS employees should do the same thing. So they'll be doing contract work for us.
Hey, Bill, have we been successful in the past, or is it an avenue to work with some of the universities, their geology camps, or field work to help augment what we're doing? Because with their field camps or mapping classes and so forth.
I want to say to a larger extent, I know Grant Willis here on the call. I know that we at times pulled in students, but I wouldn't say field camps. I know we've certainly talked about it. The challenge that the university has had this year, last year, and I think they'll have this year, is doing field camps in the field. That's going to be the bigger challenge.
Good point, yeah.
BYU did a remote field camp. I think the U did a small in-person, but mostly canceled. And they're all debating what to do next. So it's really it's changing the scope of things.
Yeah, I might add, Bill, we try to work with the universities and students. It's always a bit of a challenge for a few reasons. Most of our field work is done in the fall, and our mappers don't really like to be out there in the middle of the summer. That's one issue. But another one is the learning curve. And students are so short term that we put an awful lot of time into training, which, you know, we don't regret that. We're always happy to help students learn. But when these have such short term deadlines on these contracts, it's hard to get a student trained and productive in the short amount of time before a product is actually due. So it's always been a little bit of a challenge to really have students contribute in a great way.
And we have some exceptions, Brad. I would say that Adam McKean came on as a student.
Oh yeah, we bring a lot of students on who do become part of our staff. That's definitely true. That's a little different, but bringing them in like an intern or a summer employee has always been a little bit tougher for us.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Grant. So on paleontology, Grant's got a couple things he wanted to share, and I brought you material in, Grant, on the next couple of slides. But the Paleo guys, which is part of our mapping program, has been active even this summer. They were able to complete a couple of assessment surveys out near Arches and also down in Canyonlands National Park. The field work was successful in the sense that it identified that there probably weren't a lot of key fossils in the areas they wanted to be appraised. So pulling that together was good. I wouldn't say it was successful in that it found a huge trove or cache of fossils. We didn't do that, but we were able to at least get out in the field and successfully complete the work. Volunteers came in and helped in some of those assessments and did a good job. But Grant wanted to talk about the Utahraptor Megablock, and I'm going to turn it over to him. And just so you know, Grant, I have got, if you want to show the video, I should have that up. I can flick to that if we need to.
Okay, yeah, I think it would be fun to show that video. The video Bill's going to show is this small area outlined at the bottom edge of the block. So notice Scott Madsen there for scale. That gives you a sense of how big this block is. Most of you remember it actually made the press when we moved it up to our new prep lab here at the DNR compound. And so it's really accelerated the speed at which Scott has been able to prep this block. And what he's exposing is spectacular. I had him give me a few factoids. He's put in about 2,500 hours of prep time in the last 4 years. And he's also put in an additional 1,000 hours raising money, writing reports, posting to his Facebook page to try to increase attention, those types of things. He has exposed 500 bones roughly, at least a dozen different individuals ranging from babies to full-grown adults. He points out, this is the only known fossil quicksand block. And so it's really fascinating that way. But it's an opportunity to see all of these different individuals, possibly from a family group of different ages and all in kind of, it's hard to say in a living association because they've all crushed each other in a big bog of quicksand, but you can still learn a lot about relationships and how they lived by having all of these fossils together. And it's interesting that there's a thick crust of algae, fossilized algae over this block, suggesting that once these individuals got crushed into this quicksand, then it became a big quagmire and was probably a pretty stinky place for a few years. The real issue we have, though, is we're really doing something unique in the UGS. We do not have a funded position to prep this block. So we have Scott on contract, and he's paid entirely with donated funds. So one of the big challenges is actually raising money to keep Scott employed and working on the block. He gives us a great discount. He only charges us $35 an hour, whereas on the commercial market, he easily could be making $70 or $80 an hour if he wanted to be, but he loves this block with all his heart and he wants to work on it. So he does it for almost donated, but not quite donated labor. Anyway, we struggle constantly to keep enough funding going. We have one large donor out there right now who has offered $50,000, but only as a match. And so it's actually the question I'm throwing out to the board and to anybody else who will listen to us. If you've got great fundraising ideas, especially in a time of kind of restricted opportunities like during the pandemic, we are trying to figure out how to come up with the match for that 50,000. So far, we've found one strong donor, and we have about 20,000 of that match. But we need to, it's a constant challenge. And so I wanted to throw it out and see if any board members had any ideas or knew of anybody out there with deep pockets that might be really interested in being a primary donor for this project. It's like I say, it's kind of unique. The UGS has really not been in the donation fundraising business before now. Anyway, and the clock runs out on this 50,000 match offer. They gave us until spring, and then they're going to pull whatever is left over. They've got other interests they want to get involved with. So,
let me chime in a little quick. And these donors are from New York, and they heard about this project via some program. What was it, Grant? They saw some National Geographic program or something?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly which one, but it was pushed out through the news, and for a short time, it made national news, and that's how they heard about it. That was roughly 3 years ago when they first got on board with us.
So anyway, they're looking for ideas, and we can circle back. But we're looking for ideas on how to raise money. We've kicked around internally, maybe actually spotlighting the donors, to say, hey, there's this challenge out there. I'm going to work with Mark Milligan, who runs our GIO and is our public information officer. Maybe we can put together a story that highlights this as a challenge and see what we can get from the general public. But as a board, we're asking you to, for your input as well. And I'm going to switch screens just so I can show you the 3D model.
Yeah, remember this 3D model is only about 10% of the whole block.
So just hang with me for a minute while I make this change.
I was afraid to try to serve this out from my computer. Being an interactive block, I just knew it was not going to work in front of a crowd.
Oh, that's not it. Hang on. Almost there. There we go. Can you see that?
I don't see anything.
This is very low resolution, so it would serve over the internet. This is actually done with digital photogrammetry, and they have extremely high resolution photographs, so that basically this block could be recreated sometime in the future at any moment in time as they prep and continue to cut down through it.
So who's not seeing it?
It just popped up. This is Pete.
Okay. It's got to be a bandwidth thing. I'll email you guys the link to this. Probably best, and you can view it directly.
You can see a lot of femurs, a lot of vertebrae, a couple of jaws, and I can't remember what else Scott told me. Bones I can't pronounce the names of in there, but.
Yeah, neither one of us could.
Bill, would you also email the link for the Utah STEM Foundation if you want to make a donation to it?
Yes.
Yes. Thanks.
Yeah. We did arrange. We mentioned this last time, but the Utah STEM Foundation has set up a charitable donation site on behalf of this project for us. So really good.
Yeah, we're really grateful to them. They really make it possible for us to raise larger amounts of donations, because people want to be able to take the tax advantage of a charitable donation, and that's how we're able to do it. They've been great to work with.
Yeah, I'm trying to find my PowerPoint now. Okay, there we go. A window. There it is. Okay, we should be back. So I will email you this link here that's in blue and the link to the STEM Foundation when this meeting's over on how to do that. Thank you, Grant. This was a last minute addition to the agenda. Grant called me yesterday or sent me a message, can we do this? And I said, yeah. So this was a last minute, but glad to do it.
Yeah. Thank you for giving us a moment.
Thanks, Grant. In GIO, as you all know, we couldn't do Earth Science Week in person. Every year we get 600 to 700 students from around the state that come up and work hands-on. They have sandboxes and they pan for gold. And it's not actually gold, but they look for pyrite, I think. But anyway, they get to look at dinosaur fossils and minerals, really hands-on. So we had to go virtual this year. We created a new series of videos. Those things are out there. GIO has also been very active in portals. Marshall and his group have done an excellent job of creating portals for different programs. There's a new wetlands portal out there now. You can go out and see where the wetlands are in the state. You can identify the plants that are available or that live in each of the wetlands around the state. There's a whole list. They're tying in portals to databases that we've been creating and making them accessible to the public. The Forge project, the geothermal project down by Milford wanted an app for their site. So we actually did that work for them because we're part of the project. That's hosted on their site, on the Forge site. A new interactive publication list for geologic maps. A year of the pandemic and an earthquake really combined to drive people to our web. 250,000 more user sessions than the year before. 28,000 more downloads than before. What's interesting is from year to year, an article in an article on ice ages still continues to be our most popular page. It's really interesting. I think this was originally survey notes many years ago. But earthquake, of course, and fault-related pages, tens of thousands more people came to look at it. And all of our top 10 pub downloads were earthquake related. So anyway, lots of traffic through our webpage. We have, like I said, other agencies coming to our folks for how to do this stuff. They have really built a good reputation. I mentioned earlier the bookstore is open, it still is, but our library is also open. Suzanne is available by appointment for visits. If you want to check something out of the library, you want to do some geologic research, she can try and chase things down for us, for you or anybody. But she's doing a good job. So I'm going to shift gears here from programs to funding and budget. Any questions before I move on? Okay, just wanted to make sure as we shift gears here. Let me double check here to see it. Nope, Jodi didn't make it. Okay. Jodi's been a little ill, so I told her she needed to stay home and rest and do that. The economic challenges of the past year really underscored, the need to get a stable budget. Mineral lease dropped. And when the fiscal year started, we thought it might drop down to 400,000 for the year from a forecast of 1.1 million. It won't be that precipitous, but it really underscored, the need to have a stable source of income or funding for our agency. Our fiscal year 21 budget it's going to be a little tight, but it's become more manageable, particularly as mineral lease has recovered. I'll talk about that here in the next slide or two. The mapping funding will help a lot that we've brought in, but it comes with its own stress. Oops, too far. Okay. Went too fast. Let's see. There we go. Okay. So I said fiscal year 20 can still present challenges, if mineral lease funds don't come, some of that funding from mapping will help, but again, we got to find match for it. So as Mark Eccles mentioned, we need to make sure the legislature understands that we can get this great work done in our state at a significant discount of actual cost. We think that mineral lease will recover to about $750,000 for this year. We've debated a little bit, 700,000, 800, we don't know, but it's better than it was. I checked this morning. Price of oil was about $53 at WTI. Mark will correct me if I'm wrong. And I think Utah wax is at about 43. Is that right, Mark? I see Mark nod. Somewhere in that neighborhood. You're muted, Mark.
Yeah, oil prices overall have come up considerably in the last couple of months, and we've been beneficiaries of that. It remains to be seen how long that's going to last.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Of course, we're always asked to do a risk assessment plan for the survey in terms of funding and stuff. And we just submitted ours into Dennis Carver, who handles our audit group inside of DNR. And our risk that we have always put in is that if mineral lease disappears, that's a big risk, for what we do. Because, at $1 million, that's still about 12.5% of our annual budget. You lose that much money and you got a problem.
Well, Mike Vandenberg understands this maybe even better than I do, but the serious thing to take into consideration here is that mineral lease money in Utah basically comes from oil, gas, and coal on federal lands. And coal is almost out of business. I mean, coal is really hurting and not likely to come back much on federal ground. Natural gas prices have been, in the $2 range basically since 2008. So the commodity price hasn't encouraged any new drilling for natural gas for a long time. And the thing that's going on is oil. There's a great deal of interest in oil in the Uinta Basin, but the area, the sweet spot for that activity for probably the next 20 years doesn't include any federal land. It's 1/3 tribal and 2/3 fee land, private land. And so the mineral lease revenues, absent some great discovery in some other mineral, there actually are 19 minerals we could be getting funds from if they were in production in Utah and federal lands. But absent one of those other minerals becoming important and having the resources here and then developing reserves and then producing them, mineral lease funds are going to dwindle. And essentially, you're going to see mineral lease funds move up and down pretty much with the price of oil and gas. The need to replenish funds with new drilling, because all these wells are on a decline, all of them. And the only way that you're going to see that reversed is by adding new capacity every year, which for many years we were doing pretty well at. But now all of the money that's going into that effort is going to be on land that doesn't generate mineral lease funds. It's not going to be on federal land, just for geological reasons. And so we should plan on seeing kind of a flat line of mineral lease funds with a little up and down every year, depending on commodity prices.
Yep, I agree on all that. And long term, with the change in politics in DC going on, we're really not expecting to see a new wave of permit applications. Even if the geology were conducive, it's going to be hard to get new drilling on federal lands. I mean, there's been some political I'm not here to advocate or disadvocate. I'm just saying the reality is that over the next several years, I just don't see there being an appetite to promote new drilling on federal lands for those reasons. So that led us that we got to really start looking for other sources to keep what we're doing. So last time we met in October, we talked about, I said, these are two things that we're working on. And I'm going to give you an update on these two on the next slide. But one was to work with industry to get legislators to earmark certain tax revenues for use by UGS. Could we shift some monies to be more dedicated to us? And the other was to ask the legislature for new allocations from general funds. So with respect to option one, we debated whether to bring this up today, but somebody spilled the beans to the public yesterday. Senator Hinkins is working on a bill. It's still protected, so it's not published or numbered yet, but it would create some new restricted accounts. And it would take money from severance taxes for oil, gas, and mining and rededicate them into these restricted accounts. And I'm going to have Mike talk a little bit about it when we get into legislative updates, or I'll talk about it. Well, I'll give you the details of that. But be aware that there is legislation being worked on to move money, and it would support Division of Air Quality, or DEQ. It would support OGM and UGS. This legislation that's being worked on. Senator Hinkins is working closely with the Utah Petroleum Association and the Utah Mining Association for these sorts of things. So that's an effort that is definitely underway, and we'll have a few more details. The last section I have is a legislative update, so we thought we'd give you the details on that there. The second one was to ask for more money from the state. So remember last year we asked for 850, and they gave us 400 of ongoing, which left me, in my mind, 250 short of ongoing funds that I needed, to maintain our viability long term. So I asked again this year, because I figured in my mind, okay, Gombe says, okay, you asked for 650, we're going to give you 400. You're probably going to come back and ask us again for another 250 next year, which I did. I didn't want to let them down. I wanted them to know that I remember. So we asked for 250. And in the governor's proposed budget, they are supporting our request for 250. And again, they did what we did last year, is they split it in half. 125,000 of ongoing and 125,000 of one time. So they're listening and they're being supportive at this point, which is good. We're going to keep working on this and to see where we get. One of the things we did last year, like I said, our original request of 200,000 of one time, they ended at 400, but 200 of the 400 we got was asked to do maintenance catch up. And to replace, we just had a lot of equipment that was getting old. We had things that weren't working in our facilities, and we just wanted to get them fixed and make sure our people could do the type of science. So we got that money, and we've approved so far the expenditure of 168,000. We'll do more before the end of the year. But we created a prioritized list last year on what might be attacked. And so when we got the money, we already had our list in hand. We just started working our way down the list. So those things are in progress right now. So that includes things like some handheld equipment, a microscope. We asked the board to spend some of the sample library fund, $23,000, to be spent specifically on the core center to add some shelves across the aisles. Appreciate your support of that. I know there was one question about safety, but I think we dealt with that question and talked about it. The only thing that will go on those shelves will be like some cuttings and stuff. Mike could, always chime in on this, but we're going to put lightweight stuff on those. We'll move those from the main shelves and put them up there. It will also strengthen the aisles, how those racks, the more that you're tied together, the stronger they are as a setup. So we're working our way down the list to spend the money the state gave us to fix the things that need to be fixed. That's the short message there. Any questions?
I have a comment, and that is that, last year after the pandemic, the legislature engaged in a series of special sessions, and Wlissa and Bill and I basically spoke to all of the people on the appropriations committees during those special sessions when they were trying to decide how much they were going to cut all the different agencies' budgets. And we walked away from that having been told at the outset that probably those building blocks were going to go away, which would have been $800,000. And in the end, we were held harmless for all but $5,000 in out-of-state travel funds. And that didn't happen, I don't think, because Wlissa and Bill and I are such great salesmen. I think it happened because of the earthquake to a huge extent. But perhaps more importantly, it happened because the Utah legislature likes the Utah Geological Survey. I think that if you talk to individual legislators, which we spent a lot of time doing in May, you don't hear complaints. You hear people that are interested about what it means to their kids and their grandkids, and what it means to tourism, and what it means when there's an earthquake and you have a understandable response from the agency quickly. And we have a tremendous amount, I think we have a tremendous amount of goodwill at the legislature, and we should use this time when we have that, particularly in light of the earthquake, to try and get this budget thing finished. I mean, this effort to fund the survey with a source having. I mean, when I came on, 10 years ago, 1/3 of this agency's budget was from Menuz, and to have this agency whose main cost is people. I mean, our biggest cost, totally, without question, is salaries and benefits. And to have us continue to ride this roller coaster from the Menuz funds is just not going to work. And it's especially not going to work when it's not a roller coaster anymore, because there aren't any ups. It's just going to be a flat line. So that case needs to be made to the legislature and to the Office of Management and Budget and to the governor as solidly as it could be made, because that's the future of this agency.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. And as we said before, we appreciated Wlissa, sorry, and Mark's efforts. We really did work the legislature hard. And again, the responses are, at times I felt their hands were tied. I think I told you this story last time, that the then director of Gombe, Kristen, because we did the exercise that I explained to you a little earlier, she called legislators at midnight, I'm told, the day before the special session, telling them not to cut our building blocks. That's a testament, that you work this problem not just by people that like us at the legislature, but you also have to prove it from a dollars and cents and what the impact is. And that's what, Kristen's equation was to show. We used her equation to show what would happen if you cut the budget. How many of those products would not get delivered? If you cut my budget, how many maps are going to go down? How many reports? How many public presentations? What's going to go away? And that was part of how we got the governor's, Gombe on our side, was that we were able to, in a quantitative way, which is really hard to do for knowledge workers, because 87% of our budget is people. We're not spending a lot on cars and trips and other stuff. We're spending on people. But that's the greatest resource we have.
Yeah, one other comment is that with respect to bills that will tap into severance tax money, I'm in favor of doing that. That money currently is shared with the two counties in the Uinta Basin and the Ute tribe and the Navajo tribe, because the state of Utah charges severance tax on tribal lands. And so back in 1991, I was part of a group that lobbied the legislature with what was called House Bill 110 to share that revenue back to the counties of origin and to the tribes. And I have to tell you that 2.5% that you're looking at getting out of this effort right now is going to behave like mineral lease money.
Yeah, the only redeeming grace, if there is one, in that is that it includes all lands, not just federal lands.
That's true. You will participate in the taxation on fee lands and tribal lands as well as state. There's a little bit of state land involved in the sweet spot area there. There's some split estate minerals. But it's still going to ride up and down on commodity prices as mineral lease money will. So
yeah, I agree. That allows us to spread the pain a little bit. We'll have a bigger tap into it. But we'll go over some of those details. Okay, thank you. I think I'm going to probably cover Jodi's here unless Mike wants to do it. Oh, Jodi's here. Jodi, good morning.
Good morning. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Okay.
You want to cover these couple slides?
Sure, I will.
Just so you know, this link up here is to your spreadsheet if you need me to open.
Yeah, I saw that last night. Thank you. So our financial update, this is just through November. I wasn't able to get December's pulled off in time. So let me pull this up here.
Do you want to share or do you want to use my slide?
Oh, can you share it? Sorry. I was clicking on it and I'm like, it's not working.
Yeah. I'm going to have to do, hang a second. I'm going to stop presenting. I'm going to share a screen. See if I have that spreadsheet already open. No, that's not it. Okay. Does that look right, Jodi?
Yes.
Thanks. Okay. Is that big enough for people to see?
Okay. Yeah, this is through November, and if you'll, let's see, let me get re-familiar with this. Sorry, I've been sick. We have increased our mineral lease estimate from 450,000 to 750,000 for the fiscal year, and maybe Mike Vandenberg can comment on that further, but we feel pretty good about that. And if you'll scroll down just a little bit, Bill.
Hey, Jodi, I would just say with the new December check that you just sent around yesterday,
yeah,
we're going to be much closer to that 800,000 than 750, maybe even over 800,000 at this point with the higher prices. It's really remarkable how we've seen a drastic turnaround over the last 6 months.
Well, I appreciate that update. Thank you. So yeah, that's good news. That'll help us. This forecast, as you see right now, it looks pretty good at 659,000 or almost 660,000. However, our revenue estimates are pretty what's the word? Sorry, but they're pretty high, and I think we're going to have to reduce those down after we do our mid-year review of our December numbers. We're going to have to really take a good look at what's really possible. I know of one grant already that we're going to have to reduce our revenue estimates about 100,000, and there's a couple more that we're probably looking at another 200,000. So when we do that deep dive after our December financial reports, we'll be probably reducing our revenue budgets by about 300,000. So, this will still bring us in line with what our carry forward authority is.
That's 400, right?
I think it's 500 and a little over 500, 506. So, yeah. We've been able, I don't know, Bill, did you already talk about, I joined a little late, but we've been able to, with some of the personnel savings, been able to fund a lot of promotions and ASIs. Okay.
Yep.
So yeah, we still have a little bit of a you can see in that our personnel budget, about 95,000 there of surplus. So I was comfortable doing that. That was well needed. And I think, we're running, I didn't put my revenue tracking sheet on here, but we're running a little bit behind on our revenue billings compared to where we are in the fiscal year. And looking at December's reports, we're at about 50% of the fiscal year, and I think we're around 35% of our billings. So we need to, push a little bit further on that. But other than that, what's your next slide, Bill? Yeah, that outside funding, as I mentioned, it's currently forecasted at 2.64 million. That's pretty high for us. A lot of that is due to the state map. We have a couple other big geothermal and other large grants that we may need to cut back on our original estimates. I mentioned the mineral lease. That looks like that's going to now be up to about 800,000. Next slide. Oh, our budget request for this current session that we'll be speaking to them about, I think, in the first week in February. It's real similar to our current budget. Depending on what our new state map proposal comes in at, that may need to be adjusted. And mineral lease, probably about the same. As Mark mentioned, it's not the roller coaster ride, but it is probably going to be about the same as this year. And our outside funding, like I said, is going to continue to be strong. And I don't know if Bill mentioned, but we got all 3 of our EPA grant proposals. So that, along with our large state map, will be quite a bit of outside funding again. Bill already talked about our building block. And I think that's all I have for you. In the documents that I send out, the document that lists all of our grant proposals, you can take a look at that, and it's color coded. The green is what we're currently working on, and the yellow is ones that are pending or either approval or we haven't started on. And you'll be able to see on that. Oh, do you have it, Bill?
I can go get it. I was just going to go look for it.
But yeah, there's a lot of outside grants that we're chasing. In some years, some high years, we were at about 2.2 million was pretty good for us, and still challenging, but we were able to bring that in. So, looking at 2.6 million, that's quite a challenge for our staff. It's pretty hard load for our staff, but
is this what you're talking about?
Yeah. So you can take a look at this a little more on your own time, but you can see the ones that are still out there. And I think next year will be another big outside funding year.
Okay. Any questions for Jodi? Anything else from Jodi?
Nope.
Okay. Thank you for joining us. I hope you're getting better. Quite an effort to come and join us. The point I was going to make on mineral lease, even at 800,000, that's still 300,000 less than we were budgeted or appropriated for. Original appropriation was 1.1 for fiscal year 21. So we're still going to fight that. Okay, thank you. Legislative update. You want me to take this, Mike, or do you want to handle it?
Either way, Bill, if you want to start off and I can chime in.
Sure, I can do that. Not a lot of bills that we're tracking in the UGS this year so far. There's for DNR, there's 63 bills they're tracking, and there's 2 that we're trying to keep track of. One is House Bill 45, and which Representative Kevin Stratton from Orem and Linden has proposed creating a radon task force. We've been watching that bill. We've been in communication with Kevin. I think I sent you an email on this, Mike. Kevin Stratton and I actually spoke yesterday about this. Our goal with Kevin Stratton is to make sure that the UGS has a place on this board, because guys like Steve Bowman's group and our hazards group, they're the ones that map and track, the rocks that create radon hazards in the state. So we want to make sure we have representation. And Kevin is very supportive of that, our state representative Stratton. So we're working together on that one. The other one is the one we mentioned, which is this one that Hinkins, the severance tax revenue amendments, creates 4 new oil and gas mining restricted accounts with one designated for the UGS. I would share with you, but since it's protected, I can't put it out there yet. But severance taxes as a whole are collected across the state about, I'm trying to remember, 45 million. If I'm wrong, Mike, correct me. It comes from oil, gas, mining, including mining. And so oil and gas are a big chunk of that. They're the lion's share of those funds.
I don't believe there's a severance tax on mining.
They pay severance taxes. I was surprised. I can show you the spreadsheet, Mike. Or
out of mining.
Out of mining, yeah. They
Metal mining, coal mining doesn't pay a severance tax.
Maybe not, but there's about.
No, they don't.
Yes, you're right, Mark. Coal does not pay severance tax, but all other mining does.
Yeah, and so it accounts for, I'm going to say, is it 17 million?
Of the total severance tax in fiscal year 2020, the total was 47 million. 33 came from oil and gas, and 14 came from mining.
There you go. Thank you, Mike, for the details. So that's where that comes, So the point is that there is money from both of them. So both the Utah Mining Association and the Utah Petroleum Association, they feel most of the severance tax is collected. A certain percent is pulled out and dedicated to a couple of different tribal entities out there. And I think some goes to Sitla, and it's dedicated and goes to them. The balance goes straight into general funds. And what Senator Hinkins is attempting to do is to say, well, wait a minute. Rather than us going and begging the legislature each year for funding to keep us going, and this is where the two associations are in agreement, is that let's dedicate those funds, rather than making UGS and OGM and Advantage and Environmental go and beg the legislature for money from general funds that the members of the associations have already paid to the state. They'd like to see some of those dedicated to supporting those that regulate them. That's really the attempt of this. So each agency, we are all asked to chime in. What percent of these total funds would we think we would need, to help us, like for my case, to replace mineral lease, if and when that goes away. And so these are the numbers that we came up, is that we would ask for 2.5% of the first 50 million. They wanted to break this up in chunks of tiers, 50 million, 50 million, and then anything over 100 million. Now, just so you know, Mike, was it 2014 that severance tax exceeded 100 million? I think it's the only year ever.
2014, yeah.
Yeah, 2014. So
the last time it was over 50 million was 2015.
Yeah, okay. So the tiers 2 and 3 here, it's going to be a long time before we even see those again. So in reality, we have picked a number here that we'd be taking. It would probably help us be more sustained. Maybe that's the right word, our funding. So this is how this bill breaks down. I don't know what the final rewrite will look like. I'm sure it'll go through iterations and these numbers will change. But this is what we've asked for.
So that would give you, against 47 million, $1.175 million.
Yeah, I looked at that as a replacement for mineral lease.
Yep.
I don't know that, and there's been no talk yet that they take it away. But yeah, that's where that number came from, Mike or Mark. I got too many M's in my group. I've got.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Hi, Bill. This is Mike again. Did we confirm if the 2.5 will come off just the general fund portion or the total?
It'll come off of the general fund portion.
In that case, the general fund portion for fiscal year 20 was 30 million. 17 million went to tribes and SIPA.
Okay. Okay. Yep. So that's still 800,000 or something like that. 330, that's 660. Yeah.
750,000.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, we're and we tinkered with the numbers. As if they were going to take away mineral lease, then I would have asked for a bigger percentage. If they're not, these are the numbers we came up. And I actually went down to Emory County and visited with Senator Hinkins about this. Sat in his office and we talked about it. He says, I don't want to take anything away. We're just trying to find ways to supplement what you have now. So that's why we chose this dollar amount, or this percentage amount. But if it went up to 50 million and the 2.5%, you kind of see where we're going. If it got to 50 million. So these are things that we're working on. If you've got other ideas, I am happy to listen to you guys. I appreciate your insights. If you have got ideas and what to do. Okay. No questions. Okay. One other thing that came up yesterday that was not on your agenda, but we put it in here. Mike, do you want to talk about this one?
Sure. Yeah, the UGS has one administrative rule associated with it. It's Rule 638, and it has to do with the acceptance, maintenance, and access to confidential information. And we just wanted to bring it up as an information point to the board because the rule is on a 5-year cycle for renewal, and it's up for renewal next month, February 17th. And so it just deals with is typically proprietary industry information that might get donated to the Utah Geological Survey, and how we handle maintaining that information and requests that we may receive from the outside for people to access that information. And written into the rule are provisions for the director to communicate with the board when those requests come in, what our response to those requests is. And in the 5-6 years that I've been involved with just kind of being aware of this rule, I believe we've had one request. So it's very rare that we get a request. I don't believe we've ever not provided information. If we were to get, if we denied a request and the requester came back with the case for pursuing that information, the board would need to get involved at that point, help us make that decision. So I just wanted to bring the existence of this rule to your attention, and the fact that we'll be applying for another 5-year extension to the rule.
Yeah, and I'll pop this up. the reason I said it affects the board is that the board, I'm going to try and see here if I can, there's places where if I take the data and somebody makes a request and I deny it, they can petition the board. Let's see, I'm just going to try and find where that is. Template withheld.
I think it was back up a little bit, Bill.
Okay, help me, yeah.
A little farther up.
I see right here, I saw this here, request. Denial of access may be appealed to the board. That's what I was thinking of. Is there another one?
No, that's it.
Okay.
So does this apply? Does it matter what the written language is when the data is donated? I mean, so you know, Bill, as you know, I've donated large amounts of seismic data to both BYU and the University of Utah, and I didn't tell them that they couldn't do anything with that data. But I can imagine a situation where people might give you both oil and gas and mining data and want to limit its distribution. And in fact, when Doug Sprinkle was doing his Uinta Basin or his Duchesne map, I got access to companies' seismic data for him to be able to integrate that information into his mapping better. And, you know, it's hard to get people to give up stuff like that if they still have it for competitive reasons. And if somebody gave us access to this data and put a stipulation on it that it can't be shared with the public, does that stipulation override this rule, or does this rule allow you to, or force you to consider giving access to the public? That's the question I have.
You know, it's never come up yet. So, but I believe, and then they classify types of information as A, which is stuff that just goes to the general public, B, which is a temporary, and C is permanent. And so I think the appeals are more on the class B, if I remember right. Category A, information to the public and not maintained. Category B, temporary withheld until I'm just reading right here.
Yeah. And is there a C?
Yeah, there is a C. And
looking for there it is.
And that's really, I think, the case that Market would be referring to.
Yeah.
Okay, so it wouldn't affect that.
I think that the rule essentially gives us the prerogative to keep it confidential.
Yep.
And we can deny a request for this category C confidential information. Then again, yeah, if that denial is challenged, then that's where there may be board involvement in making a final decision.
Yeah.
I'd like to see you re-up on this, just because I think it's important to have government be as open as it can be.
Yeah, we'll redo this one. Well, I just want you to be aware of it because it does affect, you know, it has the potential to engage the board at some point. Just so you're aware, it's good information for you guys to have. This is the one that Mike Hillen pointed out to me. We might want to upgrade. We might change some language here. It says maintained in lot files. And a lot of our data these days comes in digital format.
Yes. Steve Bowman just flashed a note that I didn't get a chance to look at it for any length of time, but that said that this needs to be updated because it conflicts with some grammar regulations.
Okay, so we'll run it by, we'll have Steve take a look at it as well. Like I said, we just got this notice. We just saw it yesterday. I think it email was sent on Tuesday and we saw it yesterday. And so it's just came out. It expires on February 17th that we have to take some action. So we have 30 days. So we just got notified. Anyway, just want to make you aware. And with that, God, it's 10:05. We pretty close to being on time for a break. I would turn it back to you, Wlissa. The only thing I might do during the break is at our December meeting, I asked members of the UGS, which is kind of our annual holiday party. We recognize Employee of the Year. I asked people to send in like a sentence or two and pictures that they wanted of things they were like grateful for, things that were good in this lousy year of COVID. What were things that they learned or liked or gained? And within a few days, I had 45 entries from different people in the survey talking about good things in their lives. So I might just have that run while we're on our break. But other than that, I'll turn it over to you, Wlissa.
Okay, that sounds great. That'd be fun to see that. Do you want a 10-minute break? That's what's slated in the agenda.
Sure.
Okay, so we will adjourn for a 10-minute break and reconvene at 10:17.
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
And I'll just let this run if you want to watch during the break.
Bill, it's 10:17. I wanted to thank you for sharing that. That was really fun to see. I really appreciate all of those comments. And one of the most trending comments was how appreciative all of your colleagues were of the leadership looking out for their safety and well-being. And that's really says a lot about you and DNR leadership as well as UGS leadership. So thanks for sharing. That was the highlight.
Well, thank you. Trying to figure out how to minimize this. Okay. I think this is where we are, right? So do we have, I'm assuming everybody else is online. And
there she is. Okay, I see Diane now.
Okay. So
back.
Listen, can we turn it over to Hugh and Diane?
Yep, let's turn it over to Hugh and Diane for Wetlands.
All right, looks like everyone's here. So let me just go to a slide presentation and bear with me as usual. Okay, you should see Utah Geological Survey Groundwater Wetlands Program Summary.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. So we thought it's been a couple of years since we've presented to the board. So we thought we'd just do an overview, highlighting some of the new things that have come up in the last few years. So we'll just go ahead. Let's see. And I'll be tag teaming with Diane, and we'll introduce our two, one brand new and one relatively new employee as we go. In the past year or so, Diane and I have been involved with the DNR Water Council, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But in doing that, we ended up, along with the senior geologists, kind of writing a program mission, which I think it of course mirrors the overall UGS mission. But we were asked to explain what we do to our other DNR partners. So we all, as a group, came up with that statement. One thing I want to point out then is, we mentioned the delivery of our data to the public. And I want to highlight, and Diane will amplify on this, Utah Wetlands application and Utah Wetland Plant application, which was just rolled out recently. And relative to Bill's discussion of QT, those were not on there. However, those represent a very significant amount of effort. They were grant funded. And so I think we need to work on a way to incorporate web apps, which don't show up on the publication list that I originally devised for that QT. So yeah, that's just a side note, but more and more of our work will be published as web apps, I think. And of course, it's how we're going to make our data accessible to the public. So the good news is that we have pretty much everybody you're familiar with, plus some. From Groundwater, Emily McDermott moved to Alaska in October. Her husband, Rob, got a Mendenhall USGS fellowship in Anchorage. So she took off. And as of yesterday, as you heard before, we have Catherine Laddig, who's our new hydrogeologist. So why don't you go ahead and say hi, Catherine. I will stop sharing the screen. Yeah. And then we'll go to Diane to talk about her personnel. If that's not too much jockeying around here. There she is. Hi.
Hi. So hi, everyone. I'm Catherine, and today is day 2. I'm excited to be working with UGS now. I'm a Minnesotan, and I went to school in the southern part of the state there for my undergrad. I did grad school at University of Maine for my master's. From there, I got work with Park Service, and I've been with them ever since at Kenai Fjords and then the parks in Washington State. I'm coming here most recently from North Cascades. A lot of my undergrad work was on watershed studies. More recently, I've been doing a lot of work with glaciers and geomorphology, landform mapping, that sort of thing. I have spent the last 8 winters of that time living in Big Cottonwood. I really like it here in the winter, and I'm looking forward to getting to stay year round. Yeah.
Right on. So, Catherine, one of Catherine's big tasks will be working with Paul on the eddy covariance tower project, which he'll outline when I'm done. So, all right, cool. So let me go back to presenting, and then Diane can take over. See if I can not mess this up. There we go. Okay. Is that good?
Looking good.
Okay. Is Diane in? Rebecca?
Sorry, I was muted.
No, that's totally fine. Hi.
So I was just saying that Pete, Miles, and myself have been around for a number of years now, and recently we brought Rebecca on actually on the very day that everyone was sent home back in March from their offices. So Rebecca got the joy of coming into the office, being handed a computer and told to leave, and she did all her onboarding and everything online, and has been doing really amazing work for us with, she's involved with wetland mapping. She's helping out on a number of the watershed projects. And she's also been delving into some remote sensing work, looking at some really interesting trends with vegetation using NDVI and with surface water estimates using remote sensing. And Rebecca is online to, again, she started back in March, but we haven't had an opportunity to introduce her to the board yet. And so Rebecca, do you want to say hello?
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. That was great. Yeah, I'm Rebecca Lee. I'm originally from San Diego, graduated with my master's back in 2019. And then I've kind of I've always done ecology stuff and looking at GIS and spatial analysis, but more recently, I was at the Smithsonian in the Environmental Research Center out in Maryland doing some wetland mapping, like an accuracy assessment. And so then that turned me on to wetlands specifically. And then now I'm here with the wetland program and the groundwater program, and I've just been loving it. So yeah, I'm very excited and happy to be here.
And we brought Rebecca on initially as a shorter term position, but we now have some new EPA funding that should secure her position for the next few years. So she continued to help us with all of these projects, which is great. And then the last employee that was listed on there is Elizabeth, and she was a summer technician that has stayed on and helped out with some work into the winter. And her position is slated to end in February right now. And that's kind of how our program's generally been, that we often bring on seasonal technicians to help out, and there's often opportunities to keep them on a little bit longer, which is always really helpful to have that additional support in the office. We often end up with more projects than we can handle with the core staff. So that's been a really
always.
Always, yeah.
Yeah, Rebecca and Elizabeth have helped me tremendously with the watershed work. Rebecca's taken on a monthly run, data collection run, and as actually Elizabeth has also. So that's been really nice. And Rebecca's done a lot of data processing, and Elizabeth's moving into some more data processing as we try to catch up on those. So we did the 7 Mile Canyon groundwater monitoring well just outside of Arches this summer. That went extremely well. Once we got going, we used the USGS research drilling team out of Las Vegas, who we've worked with many times before, But they had one of their crew was exposed to somebody with COVID. So the project ended up being delayed until the temperatures were over 100 every day. But you can see they did set up a shade tent. I don't know, I think that helped. Lucy was the well site geologist and Stefan was kind of the project coordinator. Paul is finishing up a draft of the Juyab Valley hydrogeology and water budget study. That was my last, hopefully not totally last, but my most recent anyway, basin study where I did the hydrogeology framework, and Paul and crew have been finishing up the water budget. So we'll have that draft in soon. Janae and Trevor are working, and Nate are working really hard on the Emery Valley, Bryce Canyon hydrogeology, and have, I think the septic tank density study is actually in review. And Stefan is working to finish up the Goshen Valley hydrogeology and water budget study, which keeps getting delayed because Stefan's too important to not work on other things such as Forge and the Arches situation. So the new one of the new big projects is what Paul will explain. We're going to set up basically a network of stations that directly measure evapotranspiration, mostly from crops. And that's on the bottom left there, Paul setting up an early version of these stations down by Nephi for the Juyab Valley study. But he'll tell you all about that in a few minutes. We just signed the MOU to continue with Bryce Canyon and derive a water budget. And we may well add some extra monitoring and other work with the Park Service to that. And we're scoping a new project that would be funded by Water Rights and the Nature Conservancy to monitor the natural area between Moab Town and the Colorado River. All right. Oh, and we decided to throw in kudos slides whenever we give program talks. And you all know this study, the Ogden Valley study. As the Crawford Award winner, I just wanted to again give some great credit to that team, led up by Lucy Jordan. In late December, Water Rights wanted to have a public meeting about the results of this study and how they would be used. And Lucy ran that, and it went very well. It received very high compliments from Teresa, the new state engineer, and James Greer, the new deputy state engineer. Go ahead, Diane.
Okay, so some recently completed projects that we're working on wrapping up. We recently completed a 10-year review of our water monitoring that's been going on in Snake Valley. And this is wetland water monitoring, which is kind of a complement to the deeper wells that Groundwater has there, where we looked at the data that we've collected so far and made some recommendations of future studies that we could do to connect groundwater levels to wetland conditions and wetland conditions to habitat for sensitive species, because that's ultimately the primary driver behind the folks that are funding this work for us, is their concerns over least chub and Columbia spotted frog out there. So we have just wrapped that up. We're wrapping up an assessment of wetlands in the Central Basin, where we spent the last couple of years with most of the field work in this last year, surveying a random selection of wetlands out there to get some general baseline information about what kind of wetlands are out there and what kind of condition they're in. The answer to what kind of condition they're in is dry to a large extent, especially in the severe watershed. There's been some pretty dramatic declines in wetland areas compared to what was mapped. We also wrapped up conducting mollusks surveys that we did alongside those wetland assessments. There's a lot of rare wetland associated mollusk species, particularly in the Central Basin. There's a lot of mollusks that are actually just known from one or a couple springheads. And so since we were visiting all of these sites, we got some funding to collect some mollusk data. And actually this photo on the top right is a picture of Miles looking through some shallow water with a strainer to pick out some of these mollusks, which are very, very tiny. We're working on a Cache Valley wetland mapping project. I would not say that we're quite there as far as wrapping it up goes, but we've at least passed the halfway mark on that. And then Rebecca, as I mentioned, has been working on a project looking at trends in surface water using remotely sensed data. And we're moving towards wrapping that project up. We also have 3 big new projects that were just funded by the EPA and each of these projects have a 3-year project length. One is developing a plant guide to Central Basin wetland plants, which will really build off the data we've collected in the last couple of years in the Central Basin. We're going to start a wetland mapping project around Utah Lake. And then the last project I have on here is we're doing an assessment of montane wetlands. And part of that will also be evaluating and trying to improve some of the spatial data without actually doing a full wetland mapping project, but trying to use some supplementary data to improve the wetland data, the wetland spatial data, because it's very poor. And next slide.
Oh, that's me.
And so I just wanted to also mention a project that we just finished up a few months back. I can't quite remember when it was now, but we've developed this new wetland plant application, and this was funded through an EPA data exchange grant. And basically, we were able to take data that we've collected, but also combine it with data collected by Utah State University researchers, the Bureau of Land Management, the EPA, and the Division of Water Quality, and put it all together in a consistent format in a single database. Because the reality is that, there's a lot of land in Utah, and there hasn't been a lot of research focus. And even with this mapper, you can see, we haven't added our Central Basin sites yet, but there's a lot of space in Utah where there really hasn't been a lot of work. And so we thought for the sake of efficiency in being able to address wetland questions, it made a lot of sense to try to combine all forces with other organizations collecting data. So Miles spent a lot of time working and preparing the data from these various organizations so we could get it into a standard format. And then Jay Hill did a really excellent job putting together this mapper, which highlights, it primarily focused on the wetland vegetation communities. There's also some nice site photos, as well as information about the quality of the wetland, so that wetlands can be selected that might be high quality, that could serve as a reference for a restoration project or for potential mitigation. And even before this wetland came out, we were actually contacted by a user who was interested in using this information to collect seeds, which wasn't even a use I'd thought about for the mapper, but she wanted to collect seeds for some restoration projects, and she wanted the seeds to be collected for particular species close to where her restoration site was. So she was able to use this site to search for those target species and go out and do some field collection. So that was really exciting to have it be put to use before it was even really made public. And back to you, Hugh.
Okay. Yeah, this is, Diane, this is unfair, but do you remember how many hours went into this? Just off the top of your head. It's hundreds, right?
Oh yeah. The whole grant was $300,000, and there's 3 project components. And this was the largest component. I'm sure it was, hundreds and hundreds of hours of Jay's time. And then, Miles's time with processing data, and Miles and I also spent a lot of time on classifying sites. And so that you could search for, like a saline meadow or a fresh meadow, and because that seemed like the most useful way for people to be able to access that information. So yeah, it was easily over a year of work, but yeah, I can't say exactly how many hours.
No. The point was, this was not in that earlier. I don't think, unless I could be wrong, but I don't think that showed up in the some of the graphs Bill was showing earlier. In the meeting. Yeah. So yeah. Okay. DNR Water Council, I thought I would just say a couple words about this because it kind of started off as fairly informal, but I think it's getting more serious now. It's representatives of people from all the divisions that work on water getting together. It's now quarterly. I think it started as 3 times a year. And now the division or the department directors more directly involved. He actually emceed the meeting in January, so I thought I'd just mention it. Diane and I are on this, and we're kind of working on a draft document up to the top here of what role we play in water management in Utah. So these are all kind of draft, but we want to have a unified vision. And Brian Steed continually talks about us, kind of speaking with one voice. I think evidently there have been kind of different interpretations or different, even contradictory statements made by different divisions. So they want to make sure we're all talking from the same page. And we had our meeting in early January, and for the second meeting in a row, Steed talked about Great Salt Lake. This is mostly centered around ensuring surface water flow into Great Salt Lake. And Andrew and Elliot from Energy and Minerals have been involved in that quite a bit. But also Paul and Stefan from our program have had a few relatively contained or smaller studies on groundwater inflow to the lake. But I'm seeing some potential to revisit that and maybe expand it. I don't know how, or when this would translate into affecting what we do in the groundwater program. But it's something to keep an eye on because it's also among the top of Governor Cox's natural resource related priorities. And then we picked up a few interesting things. At this last meeting, we kind of all the divisions went through and talked about our main issues. UGS, since we don't regulate anything, Diane and I decided it was just, for this group, for the purpose of this group, it was just keeping up with all the potential work, our current workload and potential projects we have. Number of comments that might lead to additional work and also help us scope our future projects and mission in the groundwater and wetlands program include the endangered species program. This relates to the Snake Valley wetland monitoring that Diane mentioned before and might continue. The watershed program has supported us tremendously for 5 years now, and it's time for us to get together a report of some kind. We haven't really had any treatment where we would see any results, but we're going to be working on that this spring. Expand, not expend, Great Salt Lake effort, so we might play more of a role in just learning about Great Salt Lake and what we can do there. Again, staff time would be a real problem with adding yet another project. And water rights mentioned that they really focus on conjunctive management of surface water and groundwater. Well, that was a really big part of the Ogden Valley study. And I thought one of the best contributions. But them making the statement just indicates that that's just going to be a topic that we need to continue to develop our expertise on and kind of focus on. Also, they're developing groundwater management plans for various hydrologic basins. I think the furthest one along is Cedar City Valley, where they're wanting the local users to devise a plan, but if not, they will impose a plan that would involve cutting off of water rights in basins that are mining groundwater. And there's several more in line for that. So we might try to get ourselves involved in helping them pull together the information they need to help manage those basins.
Hugh, this is
Yes.
Pete.
Hi, Pete.
Hi. Could you go back to that previous slide for just a moment?
I can try.
It's not a big deal.
That
On your
indicates-
the watershed restoration initiative.
Yes.
The Forest Service has this program of watershed prioritization based on variety of watershed issues. I just wonder if that was plugged in.
We've tried, I think the Forest Service puts money into this fund, and independently, we tried but did not succeed in getting funding to work with Dixie National Forest on a particular restoration project of theirs. One of the projects we have in our scope is a restoration project in the headwaters of the East Fork Sevier River. So we're kind of tapping into that, not necessarily through, but possibly through the WRI program.
Okay. All right. Thanks. I might talk to you more about that.
Yeah, I should know more about it.
Okay.
But we're probably gonna have I have my colleague down there in Escalante, and we're probably gonna get together and have a look and see what we can do, at least in that particular place. So, okay. Okay, the budget is, it's pretty strong. This is what is it now? A 7-year average, including this fiscal year. So the blue, what is the blue? General funds. And the yellow up here is external funds. This is for the entire program. So the 7-year average for external is more than the 7-year average for general. There's a little bit of difference within the two sections. Diane's people are much more highly externally grant funded than the groundwater people. So I wanted to give her full credit for that. Groundwater is probably around 50-50 or so in there. And you can see we have a pretty high funding year, which I think Jodi referenced before. It's good for the budget, but it's good for the budget if we can actually bill all those grants. And I have some question about that, but now we have Catherine on full time, that'll help. But we're also talking about, well, we're gonna have another grant come in starting soon. Paul can mention that on the Central Utah Water Conservancy District. So that's our challenge, is just, again, it's just keeping up. And as I mentioned before, or have before, we're about evenly balanced between state funding and federal funding, with Diane's program predominantly funded by federal grants, and the groundwater section predominantly funded by state grants. But we've had several projects with the National Park Service lately, and DOE that's increasing the federal funding of groundwater programs. So that's all I had. Diane, did you want to add anything else?
No, I mean, I think that does a good job covering it.
All right. So before we go to Paul, did anybody else were there any questions or for either of us? Okay. Paul, are you out there? There he is. Hi.
Let's see if I can share my screen here. Can you see that?
Yep.
Okay. Does that look good?
Yep.
Great. So the James Greer currently the deputy director of the Utah Division of Water Rights, former technical lead. He had a significant interest in measuring evapotranspiration in the state of Utah, and we had several meetings with him and people over at Water Resources, and even scientists at the Utah State University, kind of talking about this and pulling together the existing data out there and start to form a network of information about evapotranspiration. And just quick recap, it's a combination of what water plants are giving off and what water's evaporated. And this is a component of our water budgets that's really hard to constrain. Every time we do a basin study, like the upcoming JUAB study, where the water budget I'm wrapping up, we have a really hard time getting precise measurements of this evapotranspiration. It's a really big component of all of the water budgets. And so that's part of, I think, what the interest of water rights has. And typically what we'll do is we will pull satellite data and use estimates of this evapotranspiration based on satellite data. And usually that's based on some kind of energy-based estimate of radiation heating up the ground and causing this evapotranspiration. And so that technology is improving, and those estimates are improving, especially with the products known as OpenET and these metric EE flux estimates. But these satellite-based estimates still need ground truthing, and this is something that Water Rights has recognized. And so this is why they want to establish a network of these eddy covariance stations. And what these do essentially is measure at a very rapid speed. They measure at 10 hertz, 10 times per second. And that's to capture all of the wind and air moisture that circulates in these little wind eddies as they move past the stations. And so these are one of the best ways to directly measure evapotranspiration. And these are what Water Rights wants us to deploy. They came up with this idea, or we came up with this idea as a group right before COVID hit. And then COVID hit, and a lot of their funding, their intended funding, kind of dried up for this. So it looks like this project is going to be attenuated because of that, and we'll have to purchase things over a longer time span because of the COVID setbacks. Because each station costs about $45,000 for a complete station. And by complete station, I mean a station that's capable of measuring water flux, energy flux, and carbon dioxide flux. And these three things together actually support each other in their estimates. And so it's good to have all three. And that's kind of your standard industry setup for one of these flux towers. We currently own 2 partially complete stations. Right now, they're only capable of measuring your water flux. They would be much more effective if they also had an energy component to them. And so we're working on upgrading those. Ideally, when this flux network is complete, we'll have 5 operating stations that are sending data to us. And 2 of those will likely be new stations. Right now, there's 1 station deployed in Vernal. That's operated by Larry Hipps at Utah State University. There's 1 station in Tooele. It's part of a network known as NEON. I have yet to reach out to the operators of that station. And then there's 1 station in Cedar Mesa area, and it's a temporary deployment, and that's operated by the University of Utah. It's a loaner instrument from the Ameriflux network. And they're kind of a network of these stations for America. And we've actually met with them yesterday to include our stations into their network as we come online. We've most recently been in a lot of discussions with the Central Utah Water Conservancy District, because like Water Rights, and Water Rights are who led us to the Central Utah District. Like Water Rights, they have an interest in measuring evapotranspiration. And we're coming up, we're developing an agreement with them and the Trout Unlimited and a couple of other entities over in the Rice area to deploy a station over there. And so we're working on getting a new station set up over near Price. That'll probably be our next big project for this network. And so once we get that one set up, we'll have 3 kind of fully or fairly fully functioning eddy covariance stations in Utah. And we'll just need 2 more to kind of round things out. So that hopefully this will develop over the next several years into something that provides good, reliable measurements for a number of different interests. Some of the big research questions that come up related to these stations and that kind of tie into what we're doing. Hugh mentioned earlier that we're kind of, as a group, working harder to understand the surface groundwater interactions. And I think this will be a big push towards understanding that surface side of things. Of course, the number one goal is to figure out the real rate of evapotranspiration. That's going to help immensely with our basin studies and maybe help with our Great Salt Lake work in the near future. And then some other things that are really common themes that I see in the projects that we work on in the groundwater group is how do land changes affect hydrology. A really good example of this is our WRI projects. We're talking about the pinyon juniper treatment and how does that affect hydrology. These stations would be very effective in answering questions about changes like that. Or how does development affect hydrology? That would be another good application. And then, of course, how do irrigation changes affect hydrology? That's the interest in the Price area where they're trying out water banking. And so we want to see, and able to quantify it. For us to be able to quantify the savings of water banking, we need good measurements of evapotranspiration. And so these stations can provide that, which is part of the reason why we would be deploying one in the Price area, in the agricultural area around there. And that's pretty much it. This is our current station that we have set up in the Nephi area. It's on church-owned property in the middle of 3 pivots, which is ideal. So any questions on the network or how we're proceeding or anything like that?
All right, thanks, Paul. That was really good. It's really a new direction for us, especially compared to when I started, when we were just looking at fractured bedrock aquifers and all subsurface work. So it's pretty exciting to me as well to move into the shallower realm. And there's also a lot of opportunities to work in that space occupied by both wetlands and ecology and groundwater. And it's been identified by the water managers in Utah as very important. So we feel good about the direction we're heading in terms of serving the state.
Yep. Yeah, we have experience working with the monitoring role, and I think those are good projects. Personally, I think those are good projects for us, is doing these long-term monitoring projects. We can tie in research, but we can also collect useful data for others to apply research that we didn't even think about. So.
Okay. Thank you, folks. So we're a little bit over. Are we okay? Another 10, 15 minutes? Anybody have a problem? Okay. I just thought I'd ask. I sent a note to our tech smart folks, and they didn't even answer my question. So I guess we're okay to go a little long. But we should be good. Okay, Mike, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah. Sorry, Bill. Oh. Hello again. This won't take very long. Last October, the last board meeting, I gave kind of an overview of our King Creek project. And since we just finished drilling our research well last week, I just wanted to give an update on how that went. I got a PowerPoint here. Bear with me while I load this up. All right, is everybody looking at PowerPoint slide? Perfect. Okay, so our research well, the state 16-2, the map on the right is just to kind of orient everybody on the location of this well. It's in the northern part of the King Creek play area, not very far from the town of Green River, about 5 miles east of the town of Green River and maybe about a mile south of I-70. So it was a very convenient location. This was an existing well pad. The state 1642 well was drilled by Fidelity in 2009. It was a very large pad for the well at the time. And so we had plenty of room for our drill rig and all the other equipment that we needed out there. And we didn't have to disturb any land, which was a bonus. This is on a SITLA parcel, so we didn't have to get permits from the BLM. And the access road was existing also. The access road was built back in 2009 to access as well. It needed some improvement to get the rig in. You know, it's been, the road has been unmaintained for the most part for the last 10 years. So it needed a little bit of improvement. But overall, you can see the landscape. We're well out of kind of red rock country. So there was no real controversy of drilling in this location. It was a pretty ideal location. And this is the location that we wanted to drill all along. We wanted information in the northern part of this play. All the geologic information, the cores, a lot of the production takes place closer to Moab, so about 30 miles to the south. Nobody has ever collected geologic information from any wells that have been drilled to the north. And so this was really important for this project. Again, just another overview map. I think I showed this last time showing the location. You see the book clips in the background, I-70 running through there, and just showing that this is on an existing state section and an existing well pad. The stratigraphy, of course, we were drilling into the Cane Creek, which is in the lower part of the Paradox Formation. The surface in that location is the Tanunk member of the Mancos, so the very base of the Mancos. So we had to drill through the Jurassic, Triassic, Permian section, which really didn't give us many problems at all. You can see there's a slice there of the 3D seismic array. So Zephyr Energy, our industry partner, had shot a 3D seismic several years ago. So of course, having that 3D seismic to do the well planning was pretty key in de-risking this well. And you can see that in the center, the 1642 is the well that was previously drilled on that pad. It was a vertical well. And then our well, just off to the side, the 16-2, we did deviate it a little bit to the north to get on the other side of that fault. You can see there's a fault running through. It's kind of in a purplish color. We wanted to be on the other side of that fault from the 1642. So we did deviate it a little bit. Again, we'll talk about the plans for this well later on going forward. So this is just a quick summary of the drilling. And you can see this is me and the CEO of Zephyr right when the drilling got started, you know, the drilling in the time of COVID. I think a lot of the rig hands thought we were a couple monkey wrenchers or something like that with our like North Face coats on and stuff, but and our masks. Anyways, it was kind of funny. So the rig started moving in on site on December 11. They finished setting up the rig December 18. The well was officially spud on December 19. They drilled down over a couple days. They drilled down to 1530 feet and set surface casing. So that took, of course, several days because they cemented in and they got to wait for the cement to cure and they have to do some pressure tests. Then they started drilling again about December 23, drilled down to 6,465 feet, which is the very top of the Paradox Formation. And they landed in what's called Classic 1A and set intermediate casing into Classic 1A. So again, that takes several days. They spent that in. So that took until January 4. Drilling resumed on January 4. The upper part of the hole was all drilled with water. And then when they got into the Paradox Formation, they switched to an oil-based mud. Because remember, the Paradox is interbedded halite salts for several hundred feet. And then you get a small little classic zone and then halite salts, small little classic zone. So to prevent the well from washing out, we had to switch to an oil-based mud. They drilled pretty fast through the Paradox. Drilling through salt goes really fast. So by January 7, we had already hit the top of the King Creek at 96.38. So the plan was to tag the top of the King Creek. They circulated bottoms, meaning they brought up cuttings from the bottom to make sure we were in the King Creek and not still in salt. So overall, when they started coring, of course, we missed the top couple feet of the King Creek, but that was on purpose. So on January 7, they started coring, and this is the point. So I had been going down on occasion to kind of visit and see the rig and talk with people just for their day trips. Starting January 7, I went down with Elliot, and we stayed for several days. We had our own trailer, and it worked out really well. But so they drilled 15 feet of core and unfortunately jammed. And so they had to trip out that 15 feet of core. So we got to see that on the night of January 7. And then they tripped back in to, of course, drill the rest of the core. So they drilled another 95 feet of core on January 8. Coring that time went really smooth, no jamming. And when they finished the coring, they go to bring the core barrel out of the hole, and unfortunately it got stuck. And so they spent the better part of a day trying to get it unstuck and bring it up to the surface. Nothing was working. They ended up pulling so hard that they snapped the drill pipe up at about 2,000 feet. And so then they had to call out a fishing crew, and the fishing crew came out, and after several attempts, luckily on January 11, which was a Monday, they were able to fish the core barrel out of the hole, and we were able to recover that additional 95 feet of core. So that was very good. We were a little nervous at the time, but it all really worked out in the end. TP of the well is 97.48. Of course, after the core came out, we logged the well, and unfortunately, there was still, they left some coring equipment in the bottom of the hole. Didn't come out through the fishing process, and so we are not able to get the logging tools down below the King Creek and drill the rat hole that we had anticipated. So unfortunately, we did not get logs in the King Creek. We got logs through the rest of the Paradox Formation, however. And then we also cut sidewall cores. So sidewall cores are cut from the side of the well bore. They're little plugs that are about 1.5 inch diameter, 3 inches long. You can take them from several different depths. And they do this with a logging tool. After that was finished, the rig was released last Saturday, so just a few days ago. So mostly everything went to plan. We had a little problem with the coring that we worked through, but we were able to get the vast majority of the data that we set out. This well actually was probably one of the cheapest King Creek wells ever drilled, vertical wells. And that's a kudos to our industry partner, Zephyr, who was the operator, and Gregor Maxwell, who was kind of the lead geologist and supervisor over this well. I've never met a guy that has been so organized and somebody who, tried to think of all angles from the get-go. His organization really led to the success of this well. We went out with our drone to take some nice pretty pictures of the well site. Again, in the far background, you can see the reef of the eastern side of the San Rafael Swell. You can see the Book Cliffs over to the north. And again, this is all chunk member of the Mancos for the most part. Just some pictures that I took while they were drilling. We had to have a 10,000 pound blowout preventer on this well, just because there are some cases of some wells in the Paradox that hit very high pressure clastic zones. And so no matter what we think we're going to hit, there's always that risk of hitting these big pressure spikes. And so to be prepared for that, we had to have this huge major blowout preventer that was shipped in from the Gulf of Mexico. The thing was just huge. That's Elliot there standing for scale. You can see the driller there in his little cockpit and the rig floor. And the video is when they were actually coring. So the core barrel is, the drill string is turning pretty slow because they cored pretty slow. Okay, the data we collected, this is just a summary. So we collected 110 feet of core all the way through the King Creek. So the base of the King Creek was at about 97.28. But we collected core down to 97.48. So we actually got some salt 22, clastic 23, which is about 8 feet thick, and then into salt 23. So we got some of the section below the King Creek. Of course, we had some mud loggers out there collecting cuttings in the intermediate part of the hole down to 6,400 feet. They collected the cuttings on 50-foot spacing. But when we hit the paradox, they started collecting cuttings on a 10-foot spacing through the classic zones. Of course, they didn't collect 10-foot spacing in the salt, but in the classic zones, they collected in 10-foot spacing. So we have really good cuttings through the paradox formation. The video there is the shaker that the cuttings go over, and then there you can see the bucket down there that collects them over time. Like I said, the sidewall cores, we ended up collecting 31 sidewall cores. And we got samples from 11 of the upper clastic zones. So you can see them listed there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 11, 17, and 18, 19 as a combined cycle. We wanted to collect organic rich material from those clastics so we could do a thermal maturity profile of the organic matter through the paradox, but then also reservoir samples to see if any of these other clastic zones could be targeted with horizontal wells similar to the King Creek. Then of course the logs we ran, triple combo sonic lithoscanner. So the next steps, the well was plugged back to the intermediate spacing point at 6,400 feet, and Zephyr has plans to re-enter this well. So use the vertical portion of this well to then drill a horizontal in the King Creek, hopefully still in 2021. They're talking maybe 6 months from now or so. So we might be back out on site maybe by this summer, drilling this horizontal well. And then of course the core and the sidewall plugs. The core was driven from the well site down to Houston. It was delivered to a lab named Stratum. Stratum used to be Weatherford. They rebranded as Stratum a couple years ago. And then the sidewall cores will also be sent down to Stratum in Houston. And of course, we have lots of plans for analytical testing on these cores, again, to better understand the geology, to understand what fluids could be in these rocks, whether or not other classic zones could be productive and so forth. So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to take questions.
Did Mike? Did you? Did they manage to drill through the King Creek in the original well there? Yes. Get on, you know what I mean, so that you've got something to work with, or is it on the wrong side of the fault at that depth?
The 1642, they did drill through the King Creek and they did collect logs through the entire section. So we can use the logs from the 1642 as proxy logs for our well. All the data that we have so far indicates that the King Creek in both wells is pretty similar. So not getting logs in the King Creek in our well is not the end of the world. It's not ideal, but we could work with the twin well.
And did you get any oil and gas shows?
We got lots of gas shows as we drilled through the different clastic zones, which is what we expected.
Right.
And that helped us kind of target where we decided to take the sidewall plugs.
Hey, Mark, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong. Since they're going with oil-based mud, it was a little hard to know in the King Creek.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. We at the bottom of the core barrel was a really nice piece of halite, got multiple feet of halite. And I question, and it has places where you can see, saturation. I wonder if it's from the oil-based mud or if it was from something else. But anyway, something that the analysts will figure out.
The other thing is, with respect to your 10,000 PSI blowout preventer stack, there was a significant blowout there on a delta well. I'm trying to remember. I think they had 8,000 PSI, something like that, which is why you had to have that. But anyway.
Yeah, we didn't see any pressure spikes as we were drilling, so that's good. But we needed to be prepared just in case. Any other questions? We're just all really excited for the drilling to be done. That everything for the most part went pretty smooth, and we got a lot of good data. We're ready to move on to the science part now.
Really cool project. Wlissa, I'd like to make a comment, if I could, for just a second.
Bill's trying to talk. He's muted.
Oh, okay.
Bill, you're muted.
Yeah, I know. It kept flashing away whenever I got to it. I'm sorry. I'm back on now. Go ahead, Mike or Mark, if you're going to comment. I got one other thing I wanted to share, and then I'm good.
In the kudos section of the board packet, there was a email from Vince Matthews, and I'd like to highlight that email with the board because Vince is an important guy. I mean, the quality and meaning of your comments is not only what the person says, but to some extent who the person that's making the comment is. And this is coming from somebody who has spent a long career in the oil and gas business, in academia, and running the Colorado Geological Survey. And he made a very interesting comment that if you didn't read it, you should go back and read, but it's a stunningly strong endorsement of the Utah Geological Survey from somebody who knows what he's talking about.
Yeah. Thanks. Just a couple more items. We have April meeting. It should be the last meeting for Mark and Pete, which I'm just bringing up to make a point that they have both reached out to me with suggestions of people they'd like to see fill their particular roles. And I've reached out to those two people who have both agreed to submit an application. But as you know, it's okay for multiple people to apply. And in fact, the governor's office probably prefers that they see more than one application. So if you're aware of people, Mark has a specific role to fill to represent the oil, gas, and petroleum industry. His board seat is assigned to that responsibility. Pete's seat is assigned to represent, if I get this wrong, Pete, please correct me, but the scientific interests of the minerals industry. Did I get that right?
No, it's just scientific interest in general.
Oh, I thought it said minerals, what I read. Okay.
And there was another aspect to it. I think that they had in mind that I had a technical background with geographic information systems, and there was some aspect of having that liaison.
Okay. That's fine. Okay. So if you know of people you're interested, that you would like to see serve on this board with you, please encourage them to visit boards.utah.gov, and they can find this board and find the application process. If someone decides to, at least let me know so I can keep track of who's applying. you're a great board and we love working with you. We just want to make sure we have good people who continue to work with you. And finally,
On that note, I just wanted to add one more thing. I'm on this Price River Watershed Committee working on things like that water bank and this lower elevation reservoir project and possible water storage in old coal mine workings and so forth. And I'm on that board partially because I'm a member of UGS. So I won't be in the future. So we need to keep some kind of liaison with that project.
okay, thank you. Back to you, Wlissa.
All right. Well, did anybody else have any other comments or questions from the board? All right. Well, I wanted to thank the board for attending and especially thank UGS, the staff. I wanted to welcome the new staff members and commend many on promotions. I wanted to thank you for your excellent work and really Bill doing a great job, keeping everybody with some great safe protocols, stay safe, stay home, and then actually really beefing up your productivity in that kind of environment. That's really impressive. And also wanted to just offer, and I'm going to speak for Mark or anybody else on the board, Bill, if you needed any more support for this upcoming session on February 2nd, be happy to help. Just let us know what you'd need. And if we don't, good luck in those efforts. And just again, want to thank everybody for all your contributions. It's been really great seeing all the projects. It's very, very impressive.
Thank you, Wlissa. Yeah, we appreciate your support and we'll reach out. I had a note yesterday in the state geologists organization that I think Oregon is now considering dropping their survey. And there's a move afoot to keep it. So it always pays when legislatures hear from folks like you, that we're a vital part of what you do, what we do, what the state needs.
Yeah, they need a volcanic eruption, I guess, huh?
Something. Well, it's an honor to represent or to be on the board of what I consider one of the definitely the top, one of the top, if not the top in the country. So appreciate everybody's efforts. And unless there's anything else, it is now 11:20 and this meeting, 11:20 a.m. and this meeting is now adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Take care.
Thanks to Paul J. and Carmen for your help today. Thanks, Wlissa.